Welcome to Astrotips, tips and tricks for Astroneer. Today's topic: core diving, reaching a planet's core. This guide is reasonably spoiler-free. It doesn't show or tell you much about the cores, but it does show some underground biomes, which I consider a minor spoiler. There's more to cores than just reaching them. Without spoilers, this cannot be a full guide to the cores. For that, I recommend Zelly's guide, which is linked in the description. This one focuses on just the methods of getting there, and covers several different methods arranged roughly from slower to faster ones. Unfortunately, this makes the video very long, so you may want to skip to the cooler, faster methods by using the timestamps in the description. In that case, skip to drop dive, or stick around for the full guide. With that out of the way, let's get started. The first and obvious method is to dig a large tunnel supported by tethers. It's friendly to new players, good for resource gathering trips, and lets you drive around on a rover. We're using the alignment mode to get a nice slope. See the full alignment mode guide for more tricks and uses of the mode, link in the video description. When placing a tether, briefly fold the terrain tool, put the tether down, and unfold the terrain tool to ensure the tether spawns at the ground. Then move forward and modify the terrain far away from the tether to prevent it from accidentally becoming physical and getting knocked over. When you touch the terrain next to a tether, it becomes tangible and gets knocked over. In that case, pick it up and place it back down to make it non-physical again. As you dig deeper, the slope becomes more gentle. Eventually, you would start digging up, not down. To avoid that, periodically sharpen the angle by adjusting the slope. We're using the alignment mode to get a nice intersection that doesn't slant too much to the left or to the right. To make a high ceiling, first dig out the ground ahead to make a rod, then aim at the low ceiling ahead of you and remove it without damaging the rod. When sharpening the angle, sometimes it's difficult to get a nice intersection. In that case, it's fine to keep the current plane and retry later. Digging around halfway took me around 9 minutes, and that's after a lot of practice. This method is fairly slow. I do recommend this as a starting point on your home planet next to your base, as it's nice for resource gathering trips and simply to get some practice. But on other planets, you will want other faster methods. You can avoid tethers by using a rover. Rovers work reasonably well in wide tunnels with high ceilings. You can control a rover by driving it and breaking it with bumps in the rod, or using a winch. A winch is highly recommended and has many other uses, which we'll cover in a separate episode. Note that in wide tunnels with high ceilings, wind power does work, so in planets with medium or high wind, a couple of turbines and small batteries will power your excavation efforts. On planets with low wind, you may have to resort to small generators or RTGs. If the rover gets in front, it will obscure the view of the rod and will be likely to fall off the rod in a large cavern. To avoid that, always stand in front of the rover to break it. The tunnel doesn't need to be too wide. Avoid swinging the terrain tool wildly from one edge of the screen to another, as that will make your excavation much slower. The nice thing about wide tunnels is that you can drive rovers in them, which is nice for resource harvesting trips. It's a nice starting point for your home planet, having such a tunnel near the main base, as caves are a great source of resources. But on other planets you will want simpler, faster methods. If you only plan to travel on foot, you can dig a narrow tunnel, while supported by tethers. The difference with the wide tunnel is that instead of swinging the terrain tool laterally, you hold the dig button and move it forward. This is much faster and should take around half the time it takes to dig a wide tunnel, and is much easier. You don't need to raise the ceiling manually. With the wide mode, the terrain tool raises the ceiling just high enough for the Astroneer to pass, although if you plan to drive a rover through, you will need to raise the ceiling, although that will still be faster. This method has a nice balance of being easy and reliable, so you may want to use this if you are having trouble reaching the core with other methods. You may notice that the rod has nice sharp edges. That's because at the start of the digging, we picked a direction matching one of the 4 directions of the world grid. The world has a 3D grid of cubes used as the coordinate system for the terrain, and matching one of those directions gives you nicer edges. We're using the alignment mode to help expose them, giving us nice sharp edges and nice slopes without sideways slant. As we go up, note that our tethers don't need to be fixed. They remain non-physical. None of them are knocked over, none of them float in the air. That's because when placing a tether, we always briefly fold the terrain tool. This saves you time later, as tethers don't accidentally become disconnected, and you don't have to fix them after driving the rover through. We're getting to pro techniques. You can build a narrow tunnel while supported by a rover. This allows you to avoid a tether chain and is faster than digging a wide tunnel. It is dangerous and I don't really recommend it. Using a platform as support is generally better, and we'll demonstrate that in a bit. Control the rover with a winch. Don't move down too quickly, or the rover will get stuck and detach from you. It's preferable to use 2 winches. Reason 1, they clip through the ground and become inaccessible. Reason 2, the second winch helps you recover the rover when it falls off the rod. Unlike the method with tethers, this time you need a high ceiling. If the ceiling is low, the rover will obstruct the entire view. To make a ceiling, aim the terrain tool above you, hold the dig button and simply let it move forward without moving it sideways. Always brake the rover by standing in front of it. If you lose control, it's likely to fall off the rod. Unlike wide tunnels, narrow tunnels seem to impede wind power. In this example, it's made worse by being on a planet with a low wind rating. Always pack at least one small generator with organics or use an RTG. The main problem with rovers and narrow rods is eventually the rover will fall off the rod when crossing a large cavern. You can recover it by attaching the winch to a small object that you can spin around, but that's outside of scope for this video, and the recommended alternative is to use a platform, which is our next method. You first encounter astronium in the ceiling above the core shell. It means there is one more layer before the core. Be careful not to accidentally disconnect the winch by misclicking with the terrain tool. In a high cavern with a high G, this could be fatal because you mainly rely on the winch to regain control of the rover. Putting it back on the rod can also be very difficult, which is one of the reasons I would recommend a platform. The rover will drive you out, but on a narrow rod you need to be extremely careful. One wrong move and you fall down and either have to reload the save, or it will take a long time to build a new rod up. Which is why I recommend using rovers only for wide tunnels, and for narrow tunnels use a platform as support. Also, this is how to lose your rover 101. This wasn't intentional, and this will happen to you eventually. You can dig a tunnel while supported by a platform. It can be a large A platform with an oxygenator and a power source, or a medium A with just an oxygenator. I prefer the latter because you can pack enough power in your backpack. I think this is the best of the slow methods. This doesn't involve a tether chain, doesn't need any advanced gear such as a winch. There is no tricky physics like controlling a rover or fixing tethers. A platform is small enough and doesn't get in the way like a rover does. It also sticks to walls and ceilings. It's easy to control and hard to accidentally lose. And being so easy also makes this method more reliable and potentially faster, because you won't have to reload your save or go recover a rover. I recommend maintaining a high ceiling. As before, aim the terrain tool upwards, press the dig button and let it move forward without any sideways movement. After going forward, stick the platform to the ceiling so it doesn't get in the way. When going up to bring the platform down, start sliding, then grab the platform to slide down with it. For that reason, it's useful to always maintain a slidable angle. To maintain a slidable angle, often briefly sprint to check if you start sliding. When it stops happening, you need to sharpen the slope. When sharpening the angle, always do this in a tunnel, not in a room. This way, while sliding, you hit the ceiling and stay on the rod instead of flying off. Maintain a large camera distance for better visibility. When you stop, put the platform on the rod. It will break your slide when you turn. If you start at full oxygen, it should take around 1 oxygen filter to get out by rod. If the angles are too steep or too gentle, it will take more time to get out. Also, don't confuse this with the ski dive technique. If you're going to simply slide down, you didn't need a platform to begin with. We're getting to fast techniques. This one I call drop dive. It's as simple as drilling vertically down with the alignment mod. It's very risky and relies on you getting lucky several times in a row, because you will often fall from high ceilings and die from fall damage. It's fast when it works, but be prepared to reload the save several times and retry. Two ways to avoid fall damage are getting lucky and getting a low drop, or getting lucky and finding a wall to cling to. It takes around 1 oxygen filter to get down, but also bring a spare for the core. When you emerge from a high ceiling, always look around for a wall. Clinging to a wall and spamming jump will reduce velocity and allow you to avoid fall death or fall damage entirely. In low gravity zones, you don't need that, as fall becomes non-lethal. Because this method doesn't leave a rod, you have to get out the first time by dying. The second time, it is possible to find your corpse and recover the equipment. Ironically, this makes this method even faster. We're stopping here to avoid spoilers, but normally you would go deeper to the core. The method I call ski dive is the fastest way to build a rod. It involves you sliding down while building a rod on the fly without any kind of support. You have to pack everything you need into the backpack. Control the speed while sliding by frequently pressing back. This is especially important in large caverns. Always maintain a sharp angle so you can keep sliding down, but don't make it too steep or getting up will be slow. Always keep the targeting circle away from you, Otherwise, it's possible to explode pop corals in your face and die. But also be prepared to die and recover the equipment. Fortunately, having the rod makes it easier. It takes approximately 1 oxygen filter to get down if you move quickly. Take at least 1 spare for the core, preferably 2, because you'll need one to get out alive. Note that the rod has sharp edges because it's aligned to the world grid. We've covered this in the section about narrow rods. In caverns, move slowly and keep the targets in circle away from you, because you will run out of soil, and if the rod ends while you're sliding, you will fall down. Be prepared to refill the canisters. Huge plants, like the big mushrooms on Silva, can be uprooted to remove them. So if your rod passes through one of those, and you plan to use the rod often, you can go down to uproot one and straighten the rod. As you go down, depending on your location, the rod may become slanted to the left or to the right, and you have to fix that when sharpening the angle. We are going through the second last level here. Astronium occurs in the core shell and the seeding above the core shell. This means we are arriving at the last level. As you go deeper, you have to sharpen the angles more frequently because of the higher curvature. If you're slow, you may have to use the second oxygen filter, so always bring spares. This is as far as the rod needs to go. We are stopping here to avoid spoilers. The rod allows you to get out alive, and you'll probably need oxygen filters to do this. As before, it takes slightly more than 1 filter, although this number may change depending on the angles of your rod. The last technique is sometimes called nosedive. It consists of getting a rover with a drill and a power supply, pointing it vertically down and drilling all the way to the core. An alignment mode is useful for pointing the rover down, although it won't always stay that way. This technique is about as fast as dive drop, but much safer because the rover protects you from fall damage. It always works on the first try. When the rover goes horizontal or the angle becomes too gentle, use the alignment mode again to point the rover down. Any rover would work. The reason for using a tractor is that you can pack it and carry it in your pockets. The first time you have to get out by dying and leave the hardware there, and the second time you can get out with anything you have packed. Astronium in the ceiling and the walls indicates we are at the core shell. We'll stop here to avoid spoilers. Normally you drill down and pack at the core. This is just a demonstration that you can do this with a tractor and a trader. As mentioned, after reaching the core for the first time, you'll have to die to get out. Ironically, this makes this method even faster. The second time, you get to recover the equipment and get out safely. That's it for today. I hope you've learned a bunch of new tricks. As usual, feedback and questions are welcome, leave them in the comments. And as this is an ongoing series, subscribe for more Astrotips. See you around!